Summary. When Midoriya had to choose a surname for his UA application, he thought nothing of it. Midoriya shrugged and jotted down a random name that he had no connection to. He doubted he'd come across anyone with the same surname. After all, how common was the name Shigaraki? As a vigilante, Midoriya came across his fair share of issues on the daily, and he dealt with them quite well. Getting stabbed? Simply pretend like nothing was wrong until he was able to deal with it at home. Getting chased by the police? Throw them off the trail and double-check he isn't being followed before returning to his house. Having to put down his surname when applying to UA's hero course when he was legally dead? Just make one up on the spot. Midoriya shrugged and jotted down a random name that he had no connection to. He doubted he'd come across anyone with the same surname. After all, how common was the name Shigaraki? The entrance exam had been pretty easy, all things considered. For an exam literally made for people with strong quirks, Midoriya, who was as quirkless as the day he was born, managed to score in the top 10. The teenager suspected it might have something to do with the fact that he was a fucking vigilante. It had everything to do with the fact that he was a fucking vigilante. During the aforementioned exam, he'd beaten the ever-loving shit out of every hunk of robotic metal he'd seen. He hoped he started their eternal nightmares, but he'd ended up rescuing several people who'd been in various dangerous situations. It ended up being worth it, because he made it through and had a comfortable... In reality, it wasn't comfortable in the slightest, but calmly, Midoriya had fought tooth and nail for his place in the class and refused to admit that his chair was awful. Seat in 1A. His first day of class introduced him to several people who quickly became his first friends in years. He wouldn't have expected someone as polite and rule-focused as Ida to happily welcome a quirkless kid, who swore like it was a well-paying job, but the student actually seemed to like him. After Bakugo blew him to hell and back, he'd never even met the kid, but calmly he took it personally. Ida was the first person to check up on him. It was nice having friends, Midoriya found. Then there was the incident at the USJ. A purple mist began to form in front of the fountain, and Midoriya found his eyes drawn to it. "Aizawa-sensei," he spoke quietly, still staring at the anomaly. "Is that supposed to happen?" The answer to his question, Midoriya discovered shortly after, was a definite no. The vigilante found himself tumbling towards a large body of water at such a height he knew he was fucked. His quick thinking took control just in time, forcing him into a diving position before he hit the water. Unfortunately, this resulted in him being face to face with a villain who most certainly wanted him dead. He let out a yelp that was absorbed by the water and recoiled violently as Asui's tongue wrapped around his waist, dragging him onto the fake boat in the middle of the makeshift lake. "Hello, Shigaraki-san," she croaked, offering him a weak smile. "Thanks for the save," he replied, looking around for anything that could be used to get them out of the situation. Somehow, the pair made it off the ship safely, just in time to see Aizawa get his face shoved into the ground. Midoriya didn't even give himself a chance to think before he rushed forwards, tugging a knife from his pocket and charging at the creature that was treating his teacher like a cheap whack-a-mole. This decision did not end up well for him, and he was shortly being held up by one arm in a painfully tight grip. He winced, looking down at his teacher and feeling relieved that Aizawa was vaguely okay. "Shigaraki-san!" he called, reaching out for his student. A villain, who Midoriya guessed was the ringleader, made a sound of surprise. "How do you know my name?" he demanded, stalking towards the hero. Aizawa, who was definitely concussed, squinted at him. "You're Shigaraki too?" Midoriya asked in disbelief. The villain reluctantly nodded, eyeing the duo in suspicion. "Oh, fuck me!" he groaned. What were the chances? When the teenager looked back at the criminal, he recoiled in uneasy surprise at the strange glint that had ignited in his eyes. "No, Mu!" Shigaraki hissed. "Release the student!" The creature that had been holding Midoriya by his arm let go, and he landed on the floor in a heap. "Ow!" Much to Midoriya's confusion, the actual Shigaraki helped him up and brushed the dirt off his torn uniform. "I suppose you're my brother, then?" Midoriya gulped and took a shaky step back. "Brother?" Shigaraki paused. "I suppose it could be cousins, but let's just assume the best." "The best?" Midoriya screamed internally, and he shot a helpless look at his teacher as Shigaraki sat down, indicating for the teenager to do the same. Reluctantly, he did so. "So," Midoriya began in an attempt to make the villain focus on him instead of his half-dead teacher, who was doing a pretty great job of being in serious need of a hospital. How's life? Shigaraki smiled widely at the question. Apart from the fact that All Might isn't here, it's good. All Might? Why do you want him to be here? Considering... He trailed off, looking at the absolute chaos that was around them. Well, Shigaraki was cut off by the doors to the USJ being kicked in. He scrambled to his feet, looking down at Midoriya. Do I look villainous enough? He asked frantically, sighing in relief when the student gave him a nervous thumbs up. The moment he turned away, Midoriya allowed himself a few tears as he cried to himself. What the fuck? After the incident, Ida approached him. At first, Midoriya was expecting to be defriended, but then the taller boy placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Shigaraki-kun, I know it's never easy to find out that you're related to someone who's a criminal, but rest assured that I'll do everything in my power to make sure anyone who treats you differently will be dealt with. Izuku took one look at the sincere expression on Ida's face and promptly burst into tears. Ida wrapped him in an awkward hug and patted him on the back. There. When he was finally allowed to go home, Midoriya collapsed in his bed and regretted every decision he'd ever made. As he was in the middle of his existential crisis, he heard a knock at his window. Uncocooning from his blanket cave, he waddled over and looked out, only to be greeted with the sight of a complete stranger. Now, Midoriya had never had stranger danger lessons before, so he shouldn't be judged as harshly for opening his window to allow the man in. Hello? The stranger hugged him tightly. Son! Midoriya froze. What? Now, I know you never expected for me to find out, but there's no shame in it. The student pried himself out of the man's arms to look him in his eyes. What? He repeated, squinting at the man. Yup, Midoriya was certain he'd never seen him before. Why, how you adopted me, of course. Midoriya's jaw dropped open. It's okay, I know you didn't want me to know, which is why you didn't have to tell me, but I'm really happy to have another son. You think I adopted you? As a parent? Midoriya exclaimed, tugging at his hair. You used my surname on legal documents. What else could that mean? Oh, it's your surname? Shigaraki Hisashi, but you can call me Dad. What the fuck? Midoriya whispered, before deciding that, hey, he'd dealt with enough shit for the day, and retreating to his blanket for the rest of the time.